Is Florida State really back after their week 1 upset of number 8 Alabama? That's what we're going to talk about today as we do a Bama breakdown from what we saw in that game, the things that we learned about this Florida State team. We're also going to reset expectations for 2025 now that we've seen Florida State play for the first time. We're also going to talk about the game coming up on Saturday against East Texas A&M. What is up, Noll Nation? I'm Jesse from Plant the Spear. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And I know you guys are probably like me. This has been a great week so far. Probably showed up, to work with your chest out a little bit more this week, a little more pep in your step. Because, man, it feels good for Florida State to start the season on such a high note. Even now that the dust has settled, it's been a few days, you're just still feeling so much better about college football right now. So, man, I'm really excited to talk about this team. If you couldn't tell already, quick programming note, my voice is like an Alabama football defender trying to hold on to a Florida State running back. Look, it's just holding on for dear life right now. Okay, so I was basically yelling for 4 straight quarters in Doak on Saturday. So I will wear this with a badge of pride, but I do probably sound terrible, so I apologize for that. So we're going to do the best we can to make it through this. I think I might even be getting a little bit sick from standing out in the rain for a little bit there, but you know what? It was totally worth it. So let's talk about this. We got a couple different things we're going to go through before we get into whether Florida State's back or not, some of the top takeaways. And so let's jump into the first bit of news that we have here. Florida State does jump back into the rankings, coming in at 14th in the week 2 AP poll and 19th in the coaches poll. Now, as most of you guys know, probably agree, I think preseason rankings are a bunch of crap. They're pointless, right? You've never seen these teams play, especially like we talked about with Florida State in the modern era. When you have so much change, this is a new team every season. You don't know what a lot of these teams are going to look like until you see them play. And so, really, I think when you talk about rankings this early in the season, right, you go back to what FSU legend Brian McFadden told the team in the locker room after the game. Praise is like perfume. It's poison. You can smell it, but you can't drink it. And this is what Nick Saban talked about, talking about Alabama. This was the rat poison they talked about, where you start feeling good about yourself because you get a number by your name. So even this early in the season, rankings are kind of pointless. But with that being said, I mean, when you look at Florida State's 14th place ranking, if whoever's doing the voting puts any weight into who they felt was the preseason rank, their ballot that they cast, if you feel confident those are the best teams in the country, how does Florida State come in at 14th? Because this was far from the 14th most impressive win in week 1. I mean, they thumped the number 8 team preseason Alabama, and they're still only at 14th. So if you were judging on, on-field only results, this is probably a top 5 team based on what happened Saturday. But that's neither here nor there. Again, I mean, the ranking right now doesn't matter. You got to carry that throughout the whole season. But I don't think it's a bad thing to kind of, start that climb into the rankings, because now with a win over Alabama, you could seriously compete for. You obviously got the ACC auto qualifier bid, and then you also have at-large bids. Now we're not talking about the playoffs quite yet. I'm just thinking long term here as far as these rankings go, but a couple of updates I want to bring to you guys before we jump into the Bama part of this episode. Obviously, some tough news for the Florida State community as freshman linebacker Ethan Pritchard was a victim of a random act of violence. He was hit by a stray bullet, and he is in the hospital. His dad has updated his condition, that he said that he is stable right now, and they're just kind of watching things. So from us here at Plant the Spear, Michael, myself, and I know most of you guys out here at Noll Nation, we're just sending prayers of healing to the Pritchard family, to Ethan, and hopefully he can recover during this tough time. You just hate to see anything like that happen. An innocent guy just trying to celebrate a big moment with his family, and so that's a tough one there. So we want to send that out to him and the Pritchard family as well. A couple of injury updates here. Roydell Williams, Mike Norvell did update in his week 2 press conference on Monday that Roydell is going to be out for a couple of weeks. Didn't sound like a season-ending thing, but probably I would not expect to see him until at least Virginia or Miami later on down the road. You don't really need him for these next 3 weeks. You got plenty of backs that you can get carries. We saw Keziah Holmes get a touchdown on Saturday against Alabama as well. So, it kind of stinks that he's been, he is a veteran back for you, and he has been injury-prone since he's got here, but hopefully he'll be back relatively soon. Randy Pittman is another one that is going to be out versus East Texas A&M. Mike Norvell did say that he will be back very soon. He didn't elaborate on what very soon is. Again, with a bye week next week, and in Kent State, maybe he comes back for UVA. But whatever, if you're going to rest someone, if you're going to get banged up, now is the time to heal them up. We talked about the advantage of having this 3-week stretch, and obviously you can't overlook any game. We understand that. But this 3-week stretch allows any little nagging injuries, anything bumps and bruises, you can rest those guys up, with less chance to lose the game, should I say. And then you also have an opportunity to not have that emotional hangover. You're feeling yourself from the rankings or whatnot. So it's a long season, right? And so this is a good point to be without those guys if you have to. So let's bring you a quick word from today's sponsor before we jump into the Bama part here, and that is Alumni Hall FSU. Look, you guys showed out this weekend. I ran into a bunch of people who said they stopped by there and got some new FSU gear and used our promo code to help save some money. And we really appreciate that because it shows them that we're spreading the word as well. And that is at 1415 Timber Lane Road in Tallahassee if you're going to be going to one of the upcoming games. Or you can, of course, shop online at alumnihall.com. And again, make sure you save 10% with code SPEAR. So we appreciate those guys supporting us and you for supporting them. That's the first place me and Michael went when we got in Tallahassee, was over to Alumni Hall to get some new gear. So let's talk about this Alabama game that we saw on Saturday. And guys, like I said in the opening, I know you guys are probably still as hyped up about this game as I am, because you really almost couldn't have sat down and wrote a script for Florida State to come out better on the season than what they did against this Alabama team. I mean, they handed it to them for 4 quarters and they won big. And frankly, the game should have been bigger. Mike Norvell even talked about that in his press conference. He said he's kind of pissed off that this game wasn't worse. You're a couple mistakes and a muffed punt and a dropped interception or two away from that probably being a 40 something to, maybe 42-10 type of game. 42-7, where you just absolutely dog walk Alabama. And so again, that was just really can't draw up a better way to get some early season momentum. But it is funny, on Sunday I had a long drive home and I would listen to a lot of the national talking heads talk about this game. And I want to address the narrative kind of that is coming out about Alabama, because it does seem like there is a portion of the media that is making this more about Alabama than Florida State. And that's perfectly understandable, right? Alabama has some problems. Let's not beat around the bush. Like, they potentially have some culture problems. It doesn't look, that's just not the Bama of old, right? Some of the effort that you could see on film, they're bringing in teddy bears into the game and stuff. Ryan Williams or whatever had a T-Rex, looked more like T-Rex arms than anything. But it's just, man, there's some problems there, right? And I'm really interested to see what Alabama turns out to be this year, because I think you will determine how much this win is going to be valued throughout the course of the season. But it should not be devalued in any way for what Florida State did, because that is still the second most talented roster in college football. That is still a good coaching staff that I believe went something like 28-2 in 2 years at Washington and played for a national title. That is still a top tier program in college football. Is it Saban's Alabama? No. They've lost, I think, 3 out of their last 4 games. They've lost, I believe DeBoer has lost now to 4 unranked teams, which Saban apparently took like forever to do. So there are some problems at Alabama, but there's still a lot of weapons. That team is probably still going to bounce back and be very good. They get Louisiana Monroe this week. And then I'll be interested to see what they do against Wisconsin. That was a team they went to on the road to Wisconsin, Camp Randall, and won 42-10. With one other game to kind of get in sync, can they handle that Wisconsin team who looked okay? I think it was Cincinnati in week 1. They got the win there. But, if that Alabama team gets beat, wins a 1-score game against Wisconsin, then maybe you start to kind of question how good is that Bama team. If they go out there and they handle their business and then they have Georgia after that, and maybe they don't get their doors blown off by Georgia, then I think you can say, okay, well, this is still the Alabama team that deserves to be ranked up there with a good win, right? Because even an 8-4, 9-3 Alabama team from a Florida State perspective would probably beat about 8 teams on the schedule, maybe 8 or 9, 10 teams against your schedule. And so I think that regardless of what people make out of this Alabama game, I think as Florida State fans, the way you handled yourself in this game, there was nothing fluky about it. You outcoached them, you outplayed them, you outphysicaled them. The way you won this game against, whether they played good or not, a good team with good coaching and at a good program, you can feel good about what you saw from your team. Let Bama worry about their problems. But this isn't – there's people out there saying this is a trash Bama team. I doubt it. I don't think this Bama team is going to go 6-6 or anything like that. So, but you'll have to watch, right? You have to watch throughout the season, and the next few weeks are going to tell you a lot about the direction that this takes. Again, if they, if they squeak by Wisconsin and get hammered by Georgia, when you're out here in a 28-10 game in the fourth quarter against Kent State, maybe then you're kind of wondering where this really is. But again, I think Alabama's going to bounce back. They're going to be fine. I think this is more about the way Florida State won the game than the problems that Alabama has. So that will be something that we'll know with time. But at the end of the day, you get a ton of early season momentum out of this win. And so now you set yourself up with a really just a prime spot where you have 3 weeks with 2 very winnable games. Again, you can't overlook anybody, but you should win this next game against East Texas A&M going away. You should be able to rest your starters a little bit in the second half there. Then you get a bye week, and then you get Kent State, another very winnable game before you go on the road for your first ACC game against Virginia. So, again, that sets you up very nicely for that tough stretch down the road. And I really like that. And then your next real big tough contest is obviously looking like Miami, and you get them at home. So that I think this win does so much for you in just the early season momentum, the confidence, the buy-in to the coaching staff, the buy-in together as a team. This is going to galvanize that team. And they handled it well. And I want to talk about that later. I'm not quite yet, but I do want to talk about it later. They handled this win very well, and that's impressive too. So let's get into my top takeaways after watching this. And I will say that I have had a chance to go back and watch the film. We actually have a new thing that we're going to be dropping on the channel. Hopefully very soon. We're gonna aim to shoot our first one on Friday, giving you guys a little teaser here. Michael has discovered how to get all 22 film. And so that's big. You get to watch the whole field, right? And so I've had a chance to go back and watch the all 22 copy of the Alabama game. I'm going to kind of just sum up some of my takeaways in this one because we are going to be going through some of the film on Friday. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be recording that in the morning, and that's going to be something fun. We actually tried to do it last night, but we're not used to using film on here. It's something we've always wanted to do. So we just have to, from our perspective, we got to clean that up a little bit. So we ended up not using what we recorded last night, which is why I'm here talking with you today. So again, be on the lookout on Friday. But some of my top takeaways when we talk about the Florida State, Alabama, and what we saw on Saturday, I think by far and away, the biggest thing that I took out of that game, and this is something that, in the preseason, I had said, when you talk about the amount of new starters and the amount of new coaches and changes coming into the season, it is not unrealistic to expect an entirely different result because this is an entirely different team. And that is my first takeaway. This is an entirely different team. This is clearly not last year's team. They play hard, they play fast, they play physical, they are well coached, and they have weapons. And a lot of the weapons we knew about, but to see them in action, Amakai Danzy, Jalen Lucas coming back from injury, all the Usman Chroma as a freshman running back. There are so many guys. We saw Squirrel White make a big play on Saturday. They have a ton of weapons on this team. And they did it against a good team. Whether or not Bama is the Bama of old, it's better than Florida playing Long Island University. You learned more about your team than they did. So it's still a quality opponent. And I think when you see what they do, the way they play hard, the way they out physical at Alabama, the culture has already been flipped, which is ridiculously impressive to see where it was in 23 to how bad it got in 24 to now where it's at in 25. That is my biggest takeaway is this is clearly not last year's team. And the culture has completely flipped. You see guys that play smart football. They play as a team. They communicate well. They lean on each other. They feed on the crowd. They take the coaching. It is a really beautiful thing to see after what we went through last year. Now, I think it's impressive that they outcoached Alabama. To me, they really did. And speaking of outcoached, one thing that Mike Norvell mentioned in his press conference is keep in mind this is the first time that this staff has been in a game type situation in Doak Campbell Stadium. Only the third time they've been in Doak Campbell. Period. With scrimmages and whatnot. So it's just the communication and getting the calls in and things like that. This was new to them too. Yes, Alabama had new pieces, but Alabama was a team that was bringing back the same defensive coordinator. You had an offensive coordinator who had worked with the head coach just 2 years ago. You have a lot of returning starters, a guy who was, been in the system in Ty Simpson. So there was just more continuity from Alabama. And I think Florida State outcoached them. And so the game communication, continuity of the staff, that aspect is only going to continue to get better too. So that's one of the things that kind of gets you excited. And speaking of coaching, my next takeaway is I know it's only one game and it's really hard to tell this early, but I think Florida State has hit on both coordinators so far, right? We saw flashes of vintage Gus Malzahn on Saturday. Some of the offensive plays that he used, there was motion, there was misdirection, the play calling was creative. They ran for 230 yards on the ground, which is, that is Gus Malzahn's DNA right there. They threw enough efficiently. They operated the pass game with some big plays to be able to run for 230 yards. And so, man, this is like exactly what you wanted to see from Gus Malzahn's offense. They established the run, they bullied the trenches, the line of scrimmage, and then late in the game, they had kind of wore Alabama down. And so they were able to just kind of hit that exclamation point, keep running the ball, keep wearing it down. Yes, there will come a time when you have to throw the ball more, but man, I just think seeing the play calling, it was. I think Gus Malzahn is going to be very good as an offensive coordinator. Let's just leave it like that. I thought there was a lot of creativity, the formations that they used. I mean, it was. I think Gus is going to be just fine. Uh, and then you have to go to the other side. I saw there was some award that Gus Malzahn got, like coordinator of the week. Man, I think you have to also look at Tony White and what his defense did. I mean, it was a thing of beauty. They had the first drive where it wasn't great. They gave up a long drive, I think 75 yards, something like that. But then they settled in. And after that first drive, they put the clamps on Alabama. I think what was most impressive on the day, clearly, was holding them to 87 rushing yards, only 3 yards per carry. And then 55 of that was on the first drive. So throughout the rest of the game, 3.5 quarters, Bama had 10 drives in total. So 9 drives, basically 3.5 quarters. You held them to under 35 yards in 9 drives or 3.5 quarters. And this is behind an offensive line that was supposed to be one of the best in the country. Phil Steele, Athlon, whoever else rates position groups, they all had Alabama as one of the best offensive line units in the country. And you held them to basically nothing on the ground. And that was really impressive. But it's also not like his defense took away because we know he has good rush defense, right? He's had 2 top 10 defenses at Nebraska. That's not a surprise. But you also look at what they did against the pass too. I mean, yes, Jeremy Bernard got you for 146 yards, which is, that's the guy we said in our pregame preview that you wanted to watch out for because we thought he was the most consistently dangerous guy. But yes, you gave some stuff up on him. But after watching the film, a lot of that was coverage bust, where these are things that can be fixed. And it was just some miscommunications. And Bernard would just go sit down in a hole in the zone where maybe a guy was out of place and he just kind of ate you up for that. That's why he's their consistent receiver that you got to deal with. But at the same time, Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton were basically non-factors in this game. You would almost forget they were playing at some point. I think Isaiah Horton had 1 catch. And so you completely eliminated those guys. And how many teams are you going to play that have 3 wide receivers across the board of that caliber? And so, I mean, that's really impressive too. I think when you talk about Tony White, one of the most impressive things, we had heard this before, is how hard his players play. I mean, they pursue, they tackle, they hit you. There's a couple of film clips that you'll see on Friday if you come back and watch that episode where the violence is back on defense, right? They are laying the quarterback out. Couple that were probably around, maybe flag territory, maybe penalty territory. But hey, man, they were laying the lumber on Saturday. And so, man, it's just fun to see a defense play like that again, and FSU also, I think, is a little bit deeper on defense than I thought by seeing some of the performances that some of these guys had. Florida State played 25 players on defense on Saturday, and that's with Kevin Wynn out. So you would have probably played 26 guys there. That's big when you can get that many guys in against Alabama and knowing that you have the next 3 weeks or the next 2 games coming where you can really get deep into that depth chart. The other big takeaway that I had, Tommy Castellanos is the real deal. And I had believed he could be good. Um, I I was surprised by how he operated in the Alabama game. Now, to be fair, they're not all going to be perfect, right? There's going to be a game where he throws an interception, he has a fumble. There's going to be a game where he's not perfect. But dadgum, he was really impressive in this game. I mean, it is hard to really knock anything he did. He was efficient. He had 0 turnovers. He only took 1 sack, and that Bama brought the house on that sack. He really had nowhere to go. He had command of the offense. I thought he never looked rattled. He looked comfortable. He looked in charge of getting everybody where they needed to be and making sure, they were able to push the tempo pretty early on in that game because everybody was in sync and moving. He played with poise. And his legs were a factor when they needed to be, whether it was a broken down play on a scramble, whether it was a design quarterback run with Gus Malzahn getting him in the run game there. His legs were a factor. And even off the field, he was cool, calm, and collected in the postgame shows. Florida State, it was one of the most fun points of the game, if I'm being totally honest, around the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, when you've probably seen the clip where everybody's dancing on the sidelines, the fans are dancing, everybody's having a great time, just kind of dancing on Bama's grave because we know the game's pretty much over. And Tommy even said in the postgame, like, yeah, I mean, we were having fun. We let the moment get to us, but we can't do that. We gotta have more, whatever it is, more poise than that, or whatever he said. And so, man, that just tells me he's like he's a leader. He has taken the reins of this team, and it just feels Jordan-esque, right? It just from the leadership standpoint, on and off the field, what he's able to do if he can be consistent with this. Now, that's the thing. This was one game. We have to see it over the course of a season. There's going to come a time when he has to throw the ball 25 to 30 times to win a game, and that's when we'll see. But, 9 of 14, 152 yards, 10.9 yards per attempt. He was credited with 1 drop by Deuce Robinson there. Javon Boggs had a drop early in the game, which I don't know why I didn't get credited as well. So, I mean, his adjusted completion percentage would have been north of 80% had you not had the drops, and his yards would have been closer to 200. But still, I mean, 16 attempts on the ground, 78 yards and a touchdown. So he put up 230 all-purpose yards with a touchdown and made little to no mistakes. That's pretty much what you want from Tommy Castellanos in this offense. Like we said, the Gus Malzahn offense is not going to ask him to do a lot, not often anyway. And I think this was a perfect example of having a guy who can do just enough to make this offense go. And that's what we saw on Saturday. One thing I do want to mention, too, that is encouraging that I got to see when I watched the all 22 copy of film back is that most of the mistakes were correctable. It wasn't getting beat physically. It wasn't a lack of talent why you missed out here or there, or this play worked for Alabama. A lot of it was mistakes that should, air quotes, right, should get cleaned up between game 1 and game 2, because that's when teams typically make their biggest improvement. We heard Gus Malzahn say that in his post-game or in his press conference this week. And so a lot of it was just really communication errors. And so they can get those types of things cleaned up. Now, a couple of things I want to just say from the film takeaways. I want to save some of that stuff for Friday as well. That is going to be YouTube only for those of you listening on podcast form. But just a couple quick takeaways here. There is still plenty to clean up, like we said. I mean, you heard Tony White talk about it. You heard Herb Hand talk about it. The way they talk, you would have thought we lost by 30 points, which I actually love that mindset. There were some drop passes. You had 14 missed tackles. So those are things, the communication errors on the defense. Like I said, there's some things that can be cleaned up. But again, that's upside stuff. Like, you don't want to be negative after a big win like this. But that also tells you that this team played like they did on Saturday, and there's room to get better. That makes you excited, right? I thought the O-line played great. As I mentioned, Tommy Castellanos was efficient. I almost cried tears of joy watching these linebackers play. I mean, Blake Nicholson, Juice Cryer were 2 guys that stood out. You saw Elijah Herring there as well, where you read, you react, you fire in the hole, and you stop. You just stone the running back or whoever it is. And man, it was a beautiful thing to see. Guys, we got ourselves one in Mandrell Desir. I mean, this kid for a freshman was outstanding. I got some film clips I've already pulled for that Friday episode where, I mean, he's just doing work against Alabama at a level that you don't expect from a true freshman. Running down plays from the backside. He's got a motor. He's good in the pass rush. He's good against the run. I mean, it was truly impressive. And his brother got on the field too. Man, if you're able to get that much out of these young guys, that's really, really encouraging throughout the course of the season. And again, we haven't even seen Kevin win yet. There were some guys that I thought that should, that you were expecting a lot of that didn't particularly make a big impact. I thought James Williams kind of had a pedestrian day in his, but again, keep in mind this was his first start as a power four defensive end there. He was mostly a package player at Nebraska. Now he still affected the quarterback. He cleaned Ty Simpson's clock one time. I took a film clip of that. You can believe that because that made my heart smile to see that brand of football back. Maybe could have got a penalty for it, but who's counting? KJ Sampson did leave a lot to be desired. So I wasn't, he just got manhandled a little bit by their offensive line. But a pleasant surprise was Deontay McCray. This is the guy, when we talked about going and getting guys from the portal, we wanted productive guys. And I know the Conference USA is not Power Four, but he was one of the most productive guys in Conference USA last year. And so you brought him in kind of hoping for like a Braden Fisk type of player. And he was really, really good. The second highest graded player per PFF on the defense yesterday. I thought Daniel Lyons had a good game as well. Earl Little is a headhunter at the Rover safety spot. He was your highest graded player. He was making impacts from the very first play on a run play where he came from like 15 yards deep and just stoned the runner. He also had another play, I think the first quarter. I have a clip of it for Friday's show too, where he saves what could have been a touchdown by just separating Jeremy Bernard from the ball. Man, I mean, he's a physical guy. If he can keep that up all year, he's going to thrive in that spot. And man, I'm super happy for him and his success. So a lot of good stuff on the film. There's some things to clean up, of course, but man, like I said, when we go through it on Friday, you'll see a lot of the stuff we're talking about, but a lot of encouragement. Like I am more encouraged after watching the film than I was beforehand. So that's good stuff. So really, I think now that we know all that, what are the questions for Florida State? And I think the first and the main one, because I really only have two right now, is can they play at that level week in and week out, right? It is easy to get up for a top 10 matchup in a sold out stadium on national TV against a brand like Alabama. Can you do that against Kent State if it's at noon, or East Texas A&M if it's at noon, or on that Friday night road game at Virginia or Wake Forest? Can you get up for those big games? You'll be up for Miami. You'll be up for Florida. You'll be excited when you go to Death Valley and play Clemson, or I guess Death Valley Junior now. But LSU claimed it, so I guess you can't say anything. But can you put this type of performance on paper every single week? That's the big thing. That's what the great teams do. You don't. There was a beautiful quote, and I don't remember the player's name, but I think it was Randy Pittman. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's Randy Pittman. He said, "You don't rise to the occasion; you fall to your preparation." And I love that, man. It's not about being up or down for any game, right? It's about being consistent and being about you and playing the best you can on that Saturday. So if they give this performance every week, there's not a team on the schedule I don't think they can beat. And the one thing I will say that I think was almost the most impressive from Saturday happened after the game. And I love the mindset of this team, of this coaching staff, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. They were happy, right? They were celebrating this win. We all were. But at the same time, I heard more comments about this is just one game. This is the first game of the season. We got a long season. Look, we knew we were going to win this game. That's what they say. They're like, the players said, we expected to win this game. So we know that it's just one game and we have to move on. Again, Norvell said he was kind of pissed off that it wasn't worse. So they're not, this team did not come in here to be like, okay, cool, we beat Bama. We're good. You know what I mean? Whatever happens, happens. That was our Super Bowl. No, they have higher goals and aspirations for that. And because of the way you played, I think that's fair. And so, you again, like I said, by listening to Tony White and Herb Hand, you'd have thought we lost by 30 points. Those guys they are hard on this team. And I loved what Herb Hand said. He said, look, what happened in week one was great. Literally nothing. None of that carries over to week two. So it's a new week and you have to get better and prepare every week. So man, I love the way they think. I love that next game, that good is not good enough mentality, which is why I don't think this team is going to be complacent. I really don't. My next question is, can you stay healthy? Randy Pittman is a guy who's already kind of banged up. You got Roydell Williams is set to miss some time. If there was ever a time for Florida State to rest some guys up, now is it, right? That's a good time to do it. But from what you can see on Saturday, Florida State has weapons across the board, but there's a few key positions that you can't afford a loss. And so I think the biggest question is, can you stay healthy throughout the course of the season? And that goes for pretty much every team. But I think at a few key positions for Florida State, you got to stay healthy. once you readjust the expectations, right, you can probably get to 7-5, 8-4, whatever. But the expectations that you've set for yourself now, that yes, I think now you need all those pieces because the goalposts have moved, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about right now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reset the board after week one, because with this win, you've now got to see Florida State and you've now seen them prove themselves against a preseason top 10 opponent. Again, we'll see what Alabama turns out to be over the course of the season. But I think I think the expectations have moved for this team right now. They probably always had these expectations, but for us as fans, I think it's fair to move the expectations, to move the goalposts a little bit higher because you've seen what this team can be. And that's what Tommy even said. He's like, look, we can get better, but this was an example of what we can be. And so if you continue to build on that, I think you should be contending for Charlotte for an ACC championship, right? I think you should be putting yourself in the playoff conversation. And so, when you ask, like, if we address the question, like, is FSU back, which we'll talk about in just a second, it depends on what you're back to, right? And so we'll talk about that in 1 second. But let's reset the board real quick. So when you look at who Florida State and their opponents played in week one, you had the most impressive win of week one of anyone on your schedule. Stanford lost to Hawaii. They play BYU at BYU next. We'll see if that's still a train wreck like it looks like in week one. NC State beat Eastern Carolina. I know that's a little bit of a rivalry and kind of a usually a tight game, but 24-17 inside Carter Finley. Wake Forest beat Kennesaw State 10-9. Clemson lost to LSU 17-10 at home and has all kinds of offensive issues. They only rushed for 31 yards, 1.6 yards per carry. There was a lot of naysayers against their play calling and what they did. And Clemson is now really starting to struggle against the better teams. They're 0-4 against the SEC in the last couple of years. They have a talent edge over a lot of the ACC teams. So even in a down year, they can have a good season. But when Florida State, when like a Miami, when these teams that have talent are at their peak, they can pose a real challenge to Clemson. So we'll see. I don't think Clemson, is unbeatable, and I don't think Death Valley is that impenetrable force that maybe it used to be. So then you have Pitt. They beat Duquesne 61-9. Don't really learn anything from that. UVA beat Coastal Carolina 48-7. They have NC State next weekend. That's one or this coming up weekend. That's one you're going to want to watch. It is in Carter Finley, so we can get a good read on both of those opponents in that game. Of course, Miami beat Notre Dame, did get a top 10 win, 27-24. Looked good in the first half. Notre Dame kind of pulled back in the second half. That offense for Notre Dame is not good. I don't know who. I think Mike Denbrock is the offensive coordinator. All we heard about was Jeremiah Love and being one of the best running backs in college football. And it was like they didn't know he was on the roster. So I'm going to give Miami credit. I think they look a little bit better than I thought. Their defense has actually kind of got some things figured out. But, me and Michael were talking about this the other day, and I thought this might have been an okay way to put it, right? Follow me here and tell me if you think I'm right. When I look at the results from week one, I think Miami is probably the best team remaining on your schedule. Now, we don't know what Florida is yet. They're out here playing high school teams. But I think right now, Miami's probably the best team on your schedule. But I still think Clemson's the toughest game remaining after Alabama, the toughest game remaining on your schedule because of where you got to go to do it, right? Now, LSU still won, but it was a hard-fought win in there. So I kind of look at where that's at. And you get Miami at home, which is good. Now, they're coming off a bye, but you get an extra day. Virginia Tech, in a neutral site, loses to South Carolina 24-11. That offense has still got issues. Kyron Jones is still inconsistent. And like I said, Florida beat a high school team 55-0, Long Island University. So they got South Florida next on Saturday. Sorry, my voice is trying to end the show early, but they get that scrappy South Florida team that just upset number 25 Boise State in week one. So that will be one that I think will be interesting to watch. That'll be a much better test against Florida there. But man, I just think when you look at that, and you realize what you did in week one, if you can play like that throughout all 12 games of the season, the remaining 11, I don't see a team on that schedule that we just talked about that Florida State can't beat. Right now, again, we don't know what Florida is. We'll see how Clemson bounces back. We'll see how good LSU is. We'll see how good Alabama is. But I just don't see a team on that schedule that Florida State can't beat if you play like you did on Saturday against Alabama and you continue to get better. So I do think you should at least be considered in the conversation for the ACC championship there in Charlotte to make it. I mean, you look like one of the best 2 to 3 ACC teams or in the conference right now. You and Miami look top two, and so if you put yourself in that conversation, obviously you don't want to talk about playoffs yet because that's a long way off, but it's there, right? And then depending on how the schedule shakes out, you could also get maybe snag an at-large bid if you're 10 and 2, 11 and 1. So I think it's just the point is, if you beat Clemson and Miami, I think you're as good as in Charlotte, right? If you beat Clemson or Miami, I think you're probably in contention for Charlotte. If you lose to both, you're going to need some help. But because remember, LSU was not a conference game. So I just say that to say I think everything is on the table for Florida State, right? I think with what you accomplished in week one, you showed yourself that everything is on the table. So the conversation comes back to, is Florida State back? And I think you have to ask the question first, what is back? For a program like Florida State, back is competing for the ACC championships that we talked about. It is competing for a playoff spot and a national championship like we talked about. So is Florida State there? We don't know. It's been one game. I think you have to give it time to figure this out. Let's see if you can go handle your business against an overmatched opponent in these next 2 games. You don't play down to the competition. Can you go on the road to Virginia and win the game probably like you're supposed to by the time that game rolls around? Can you beat a top 10, top 5 Miami at home in the next few weeks? That's going to tell you a lot about whether you're headed towards being back or not. So I'm going to say right now it's to be determined. But I will say this, Florida State is back. They are back to playing a physical, hard-nosed style of football. They are back to good play calling, good coaching, exciting team to watch on Saturdays. You are no longer kind of the butt of the joke on Saturdays, right? This is the team that is fun to watch. This is the team that you can go in on any given Saturday and expect them to have a chance to win. So is Florida State back to winning championships? Well, no, they haven't played enough games to accomplish that feat yet. But is Florida State back to being a respectable opponent that is fun to watch on Saturdays and plays a daggone good brand of football? Well, through a one-game sample set, we can say that is for certain a yes. And so that is where Florida State is at. They are back to playing like a team that holds itself to that standard that's been set at Florida State. But we'll see how it plays out over the next 11 games and see if they can put themselves in a position to earn that standard back and go win something and go put a trophy, in the hardware case, because we are not preseason champs and offseason champs like a team down south. You got to earn something to do it. So we'll see how it plays out over the course of the season. But the next game is right around the corner on Saturday. And so it is against the East Texas A&M Lions. Look, guys, there's not a whole lot to say about this team. It is a Division I FCS team. They just transitioned from Division II. They went 3-9 last year, but it is the next game, so we're going to talk about it a little bit here. Florida State does play on noon at noon on ACC Network. And when you look at this team, they do play in the Southland Conference. And a fun fact, their athletic director did spend 10 years at FSU. So I'm sure there will be some familiar faces around Doak Campbell on Saturday. But let's talk about what they did in week one. They did play, obviously, an overmatched team in SMU. They lost 42-13. But this game was maybe a little bit tighter than it seemed. SMU jumped out quick to a 14-point lead, but it was only 21-3 at half. And East Texas A&M did have a touchdown called back where the running back took a wheel route and scored a touchdown, but he stepped out of bounds by like a quarter of an inch. And so really you were that close to that game being 21-10 at halftime. Now they did get into the red zone. They did not convert, and then they missed a 22-yard field goal. So the point is that game could have been pretty tight at half, but even then, it was 28-3 at the start of the fourth quarter. And for me, if I'm Florida State, knowing what I did to Alabama last week, I would like that game to be 28-3 by no later than halftime. 28-3 in the fourth quarter against East Texas A&M, an FCS team. I'm gonna kind of be a little nervous, right? If we see that, unless there's just some crazy reason for it. But I also will say that East Texas A&M scored 10 of their 13 points in the final 3 minutes when the backups were put in because SMU was up 42-3 at that point. Now, SMU did also have a punt return touchdown called back and they did score 2 defensive touchdowns on the day. So really, offense kind of struggled against that defense for SMU there. I mean, that's only what, like 28 points on offense. Now, East Texas A&M did put up 351 yards, 244 pass, 107 rush, only 3.1 yards per carry. And SMU put up 400 yards, 260, 140 on the ground, and 4.2 yards a carry. So not really, as I said, not a big explosive day by the SMU offense there. I mean, you put up almost as yards on Alabama as they did on East Texas A&M. So too bad you don't play them this year. But both teams were kind of sloppy in this game. So that's some week one issues. They had 3 turnovers. Both teams did. East Texas A&M had 11 penalties, but they did hold the ball for 39 minutes. And also, I will say SMU, I think, had 7 or 8 penalties in the first half. So they did not play a very disciplined game there. But the one X factor that I have for this game is East Texas A&M star quarterback Ron Peace did not play. I don't know why. I listened to the TV copy. Even the broadcasters did not know why. They said he wasn't dressed. So I don't know if he's going to play Saturday versus Florida State. I don't know. I don't know if he's injured. I don't know if they're just, resting him for conference play or something like that. But he is definitely the better of the 3 that they will use. He threw for 2,935 yards and 20 touchdowns last year, but did have 16 picks. The starter against SMU was senior quarterback Will Madonna. He went 6 of 13 for 54 and an interception before he got the hook. He was replaced by junior quarterback Eric Rodriguez, who went 14 of 30 for 191, an interception, and 2 fumbles. So he had some turnover problems there. He is more of a mobile guy. 5'10", 199, had 9 carries on the night. He's like he's like a Timu version of Tommy Castellanos, right? He's their kind of small mobile quarterback. That just neither one looked very good, right? They both had a sub 50% completion percentage and had no passing touchdowns. The offensive line for the Lions is actually, they got some pretty decent size. They got some big boys up front, but they did not play great against SMU. SMU was in the backfield quickly and consistently. They did allow 21 pressures and 3 sacks on the night, and FSU had 19 pressures and 3 sacks against Alabama. So I'm hoping those numbers continue to trend up. Wide receiver Christian Jourdain is a name to know on offense. He is a all-conference player from last year who put up 683 yards and 6 touchdowns, and he did lead them in receptions against SMU, but not yards. So when you talk about the defense here, it does actually, the way the starters are listed, it does come out as a 3-3-5 defense. It does kind of look like Tony White's, where you'll see 3 down linemen, a linebacker walked up on the edge with a 2-point stance. They will go multiple fronts. They will show simulated pressures. They do a lot of that stuff too. But the one thing that really stood out on the defense here is their defensive backs played really, really soft coverage against SMU because they knew their DBs could not match the speed of the SMU wide receivers. So I think of a guy like Squirrel White. I think of Javon Boggs. I think of, a Jalen Lucas, some of the fast guys on this team that, there were times when Kevin Jennings, they were given, a 10 to 15 yard cushion, and he was just taking what they would give him. I think at one point in the second quarter, he started 10 of 12 for 148 and a touchdown. So if Tommy is just smart, like he was against Alabama, just take what they give him, he's going to be able to be successful through the air. East Texas A&M did create 7 pressures and 3 sacks. They picked off a pass, and they forced 2 fumbles. So again, you want to see the offensive line have another good week and keep the defense off of Tommy. And you want to see them play a clean game. Now, they had some tackling issues. They had 15 missed tackles on the night on defense. East Texas A&M did. So when we talk about this game as a whole, I really think the most important part here is you need to start fast, right? You don't want to be in a situation like you were against North Alabama in 2023. You would love to jump out to an early lead. You would love to try and get your starters out of there as soon as possible. Now, you want them to play a couple quarters because, again, you need that offensive line to get gelled. You need this offense as a whole to get gelled as a starting unit. So you need that continuity, that snap count there. But then you need to start getting the younger guys who we saw get snaps against Alabama, get more snaps in this game, get a heavier workload. So you kind of know more about what you got against them, or got in them against other opponents. But, again, man, you can't take any games lightly. This is a depth building game, right? But you can't take any game lightly. And I think at the end of the day, you really just want to get that experience, build that depth, and get out of this with no injuries, because SMU had 2 guys that got taken off the field and taken to the locker room in the first quarter alone. So that is the nightmare scenario that you want to avoid. So start fast, play clean. Don't Don't, have a bunch of penalties and turnovers and mistakes. Let them hang around. It's like my high school coach used to always say, you got to smash a gnat with a sledgehammer. This is the gnat. You're a sledgehammer. Let's go handle business. That's going to do it for this episode, guys. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe on YouTube to stay connected to your source for fan-driven FSU content. Give us a rate and review on the podcast. Would help us reach other Noles fans. It's free. It's going to keep you connected with all the FSU content that you want. If you would like to join the channel as a member to help support what we do, we are an independent outlet, and other than Alumni Hall, we are self-funded. So you guys can help us grow this, be a part of the tribe, and everything that you donate, it's one small donation a month, goes right back into the program to make it better for you. So we appreciate you guys' support. Thank you for supporting Alumni Hall. Make sure you check out our website at plantthespear.com. We have written articles, all of our YouTube videos, and our podcast episodes over there. So, man, appreciate it, guys. I know, man, just what a fun Saturday, right? It's this week feels so much different, right? From a fan's perspective, being down there on Saturday, man, we had so much fun. We ran into so many people that came up to us and talked to us, said they listened to the show. We really appreciate that. So thank you to those who came up and talked to us. That means the world to us to be able to meet you guys. Always come up and say something. We love that. Shout out to my guy Ronnie, who hosted me and Michael at his tailgate. Man, treated us like family. Just great hospitality. I met Ronnie at the Florida game last year. We're going to be tailgating again later this year for some other games, but I just wanted to give him a shout out and say thank you for that. We become friends now, man, and that's what it's all about, right? For us, it's all about the community, and you guys are just a big part of that as we are. So, man, can't thank you guys enough. We appreciate it. Love, love, love being out there on Saturday, being at Doak. Storming the field. I know we predicted that it could happen, but I don't think we really expected it to happen. The game day experience was awesome. You had the Chiefs were off the chain, and they were playing a lot. It was a great experience, man. I still got a scar on my arm here from the bricks at Doak. Now I know what it's like to be one of them footballs that DJU was throwing into the bricks last year because we got the same scar. So yeah, I got that will last there for a while. But man, just a fun Saturday, and I know you guys are still enjoying this. So check back for that film episode on Friday, and we will also have a post game after East Texas A&M. And man, looking forward to it. So with that being said, guys, take care, and as always, go Noles.